Let's go through some best practices on how to set up alerts within error monitoring. As you probably know, Sentry groups error events into issues based on their stack trace and other factors. Metric alerts can perform various aggregations on all the events in your project, regardless of which issue they belong to, and tell you when their frequency exceeds or goes below a threshold, while issue alerts tell you about changes in individual issues, such as when a new issue is created. Let's talk about metric alerts first. So I will show now how we create metric alerts here at Sentry and the best practices we recommend. This will consist of going in and showing how an alert is set up, as well as how it would actually look like in Sentry to help us solve for the root cause of the issue. So let's say you're running an e-commerce store like what was shown earlier, and you want to make sure you're identifying any problematic trends that are affecting your entire user base. If it is, you want to quickly get notified of it. To do this, we will go ahead and set up a metric alert. So you can actually set an alert on two forms of event types, errors and transactions. We will come back to transactions later. It's often very useful to alert on the total number of errors in a project. But for now, we'll filter our events down to our highest priority customers experiencing issues with the customer type tag. You can see Sentry provides you some pre-built functions that could be applied to this event data, such as count or unique count. An example of when unique count might be helpful is when a developer might want to alert on the number of unique users being affected by those errors in the filtered data set. This is because you can have a ton of errors being seen by only a couple of users, which is a less important problem than errors being seen by lots of users. Since we want to be notified of the total number of errors, we will leave this on count for now. Furthermore, we will set the time window so this function will be applied over 5 minutes worth of data. You could see here we could specify what environment we want to set this alert in. For now, we will just leave it at all environments. We will now set our thresholds. If we inspect our data thus far, we can see we've actually encountered some unusually high peaks above 20 and above 40 of events. So let's set our critical status to 20, which means the alert will become critical when more than 20 errors are seen in the last 5 minutes. We will set our warning threshold to 10 errors, and the default behavior of resolution is to automatically resolve when the metric goes below the warning threshold. But we'll override it to resolve only when the number of errors goes below 5 in the last 5 minutes. As you can see, Sentry is able to highlight these different thresholds for you. Now we will set an alert action to make sure that when this alert fires, we will be notified accordingly. One cool thing about Sentry's alerts is that we could set up how we get notified based on how severe the problem is. So if the total number of events goes over 20, the critical status will be hit and we'll get notified via our PagerDuty integration. For warning status, we want to be notified via our Slack integration. Now all I need to do is give this alert a name and save it. Now let's look at the same metric alert after it has been sent to our Slack channel. You could see on the metrics alert page, we get a high-level summary of what happened. Things like what environments did the alert originate from, what project it was tied to, and overall users affected. You can also see a high-level summary of the alert itself and what activity or comments have been made already. Now let's use Discover, Sentry's query tool, to figure out what may have been causing this ongoing problem. We will look at the past 24 hours and we can see that Sentry naturally bubbles up the issues that have fired off in the most amount of occurrences in the time range selected. Generally, you'll find that either a single issue is causing the spike or it's coming from multiple issues, which generally indicates a more system-wide problem. If the issue isn't obvious, you can also change the columns you see here to explore further. For example, if the default view of issues is not useful, I can change my view to group by the title of the error events instead. For now, I'll go back to the default view and jump into the first issue where I can verify what was the root cause of the problem. Now let's shift gears and focus on issue alerts. To recap, issue alerts tell you about changes in individual issues, such as when a new issue is created. Every time an event is captured by Sentry, the issue alert rule is checked, and if the conditions are met for the issue corresponding to that event, the alert fires. Let's set up an actual issue alert. Let's say the use case here will be that I want to see a notification whenever an issue is seen 2 or more times in under 1 minute. The reason being that instead of like last time where I want to see any errors related to customer impact, I now want to make sure to screen for any persistent problems that occur frequently in a specified period of time. In this case, it will be for any persistent errors in a new mobile beta release of the earlier e-commerce store example. This alert could be triggered if similar errors are ingested within that short amount of time. As you can observe, a similar interface as we had earlier. We can go in and set our environment. I will leave this to all environments for now. We give it a name, and for conditions we can see we have some out-of-the-box options here. For example, if the issue is first seen, we can alert on that. Note, if an issue changes state from being ignored to unresolved, we do not automatically send you a notification. So you might want to create an alert using something like the issue changes state from ignored to unresolved condition. For now, I will set up our conditions so that if any event happens to show up 2 times or more within the specified time frame, we should be notified of the problem. We can now apply some optional filters to further cut down the noise. For example, you could filter the alert to issues that are newer than a certain time. This is to avoid getting alerted about old problems you already know about. Next, you'll often find that many issues happen a couple of times and then never happen again. The issue has happened at least X times filter can help prevent those kind of issues from alerting. Additionally, our customers also find the issue is assigned to filter helpful because if an issue is assigned to you, you're probably already aware of it, so you'd want to filter them out. For now, let's go with event is from the latest release filter, which I will use to restrict alerts only to issues that are happening in the latest release. One commonly useful rule is to combine this with the new issue trigger to only alert about issues that were first seen in the latest release. It's recommended that everyone should have at least 2 types of issue alerts in a project. One for when new issues are created and another for when issues spike. That is, when the frequency of an issue exceeds a certain threshold. In the Actions section, we will be taking advantage of another popular way of getting notified of an alert, Sentry's Microsoft Teams integration. I select a team and a channel, and now I will be able to receive the alert within Microsoft Teams. Additionally, to showcase Sentry's issue ownership rules, which was mentioned earlier, I will also set up an action to send out an email. When you select email as the action, the default destination is something called issue owners. Issue owners are rules that tell Sentry who is responsible for an issue based on properties like path, URL, and tags. Think of them as similar to a code owner's file. This feature allows alerts to automatically get routed to the right people. So to recap the difference between triggers and filters, triggers are interesting events you want to know more about. For example, new issues, regressions, or spikes, while filters are things that help you cut down the noise. The action interval sets a rate limit on how many times this particular alert rule can fire for a particular issue. We'll leave this at the default of 30 minutes, which means that once you've been alerted about an issue via this alert rule, you won't be notified of the same issue by the same alert rule for at least another 30 minutes. Now we simply create the alert. Note, organizations that configure at least one alert rule are actually 4 times more likely to successfully triage that issue and 3 times more likely to resolve an issue. So now, looking at the issue alert after it has been fired in Microsoft Teams, you can see that we get the title of the error as well as a brief description of the error itself, with a link to go directly into Sentry to deal with it like we did before, but we also have the ability to resolve it, ignore it, or unassign it. Let's resolve it immediately for now. So that's all for errors. Now let's move on to performance monitoring.